name is Christina Turner, and I am the city manager for Morgan Hill. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight for our community town hall meeting. For those of you that this is your first town hall, after COVID-19 started and the shelter in place started, we wanted to have a way that we could engage with our community. And so we started weekly town hall meetings, first to provide a forum to update our community, and then just an opportunity to be able to have the community ask questions, provide comments, and then just for you to hear from us. And so we've not only talked about COVID, but we've had a variety of other issues that we've been able to do and discuss through our community town halls, you know, everything from our Hale Avenue extension to economic development, business recovery. And last Tuesday, we hosted our first police town hall. And really the purpose of this town hall today is a continuation of last week's town hall, and really wanting to be able to share with our community about our police department, you know, who we are, who the men and women of our police department are, and what policing means to us, and what our culture is all about, what our mission is about. And so last week, our chief talked about some of those things, and we left plenty of time for Q&A, and normally we try to end by 6:30, and so we wrapped up probably about 7 and still had a lot of question and answers, and so we took all those down. And so tonight we'll first start by reviewing some of those questions from last week, and then we'll address additional questions, and you'll also hear from our chief. And so the first thing I wanted to just mention is wanted to just, you know, announce to this group that Shane Palsgrove is now our chief of police, no longer interim. And so I wanted to announce that, and please join me in welcoming him and congratulating him. But before we do that, I have a couple different announcements that I wanted to make, and then what I'm going to do is turn it over to our chief. First, as by way of town halls, next week, June 25th, so a week from today, we've invited our representative from the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, Mike Wasserman, to join us. So that'll be at 5:30, and so we welcome your participation in that. And then we will not have a town hall on July 2nd. Last night we had a council meeting that actually went into this morning. I think we wrapped up at about 1:15 this morning. And one of the items on the agenda last night was our budget. And so our budget was approved last night, and approved in the midst of a lot of uncertainty as it relates to COVID and sort of what that means to our revenues. And so we will be back to council at least monthly to go through our revenues and how our actual results are going to compare to the assumptions in our budgeted revenues and our expenditures as well. And so our next return date to council to discuss our budget and how we're tracking is going to be July 22nd. I wanted to also let you know that we will have a council workshop on the topic of police, to talk about some of our policies, and just to have it in the format where our council is there. It'll be a workshop, but our mayor and our 4 council members will also be participating. These town halls are led by staff. Some of the council members do join in, but these town halls are staff driven. Last night I shared with the community, part of the materials for last night was a resolution that our council adopted back in 2017. And so I just wanted to quickly share the resolution. And basically it was a reaffirming of our commitment to a diverse, supportive, inclusive community, and to protect the constitutional rights of its residents. And in that resolution that was adopted back in 2017, it was a reminder that part of the vision of our sustainable Morgan Hill is to be socially responsible. The resolution talks about how the city of Morgan Hill rejects bigotry, does not tolerate discrimination or hate crimes, harassment, or assault, and that we will promote safety, a sense of security, and equal protection of constitutional and human rights, leading by example through equitable treatment of all by city officials and departments. And the last thing I want to say before I turn it over to Chief Palsgrove is I just want to, as the city manager, speaking on behalf of our leadership team, as well as I can also speak on behalf of our council. I want to just thank the police department for the work that they do. Right now, it's a very trying and a very challenging time, but I want to assure you that your Morgan Hill Police Department is here to serve the community, and they do so much. And I just want to thank them publicly for all that they do, to keep us safe. And, we in this resolution, we talk about the sense of security and safety. And I just want to thank them for the work that they do. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chief. And Chief, if you would just share with this group some updates, and then we'll go right into Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Christina. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. It's been a rough 3 months responding to COVID-19, budget reductions, protests, responding to San Jose's mutual aid request for looting and riots, and calls for reform. I understand it is difficult during these times to get information from police departments, which results in frustration, fear, and a lack of trust that systemic issues won't be resolved. My job is to be available to you, to listen, and to ensure our community remains safe. I am here now at community events, workshops, available by email, phone, or by appointment. I ask that we all come together with an open mind and think about issues from each other's shoes, each other's perspectives, so we can continue building strong relationships and make good policy decisions that considers all scenarios. We are all here to make Morgan Hill a better place to work and live. Tonight, I will share 3 things and then listen to your questions. Things like the actions that we've taken since our last town hall meeting, increasing transparency of information on our website, and reiterate the importance of relationships. Since our last meeting, we have updated information on our website to include the elimination of the carotid control hold from our policy. And we've posted our use of force and diversity statistics on our website. We will continue to discuss other options to address calls for service that may require another method other than a police presence. In regards to cases that do require a police presence, our officers have been busy over the past few weeks doing great work that I'd like to share with you, like the arrest of a suspect cooking methamphetamine at a hotel that presented a health risk to others staying there. Responding to shots fired on Trail Drive and again on Pete Road. Officers located the vehicle, which led them on a pursuit to San Jose. San Jose's helicopter was able to join the pursuit. Our officers used a pursuit intervention technique to spin the car out, and the car regained control and continued. And then it threw 2 loaded firearms out the window and a loaded magazine, which the helicopter was able to pick up on its video. Then the officers used another pit technique and spun the vehicle out and were able to arrest the suspects. Officers located a Los Banos carjacking suspect in our town who stole a car at gunpoint, who led the officers on a short pursuit and then crashed. Officers arrested that suspect. Officers have also been present to monitor our Morgan Hill peaceful protests downtown. And it's important to mention that none of these incidences resulted in a use of force resulting in injury. In regards to transparency, we are committed to continue the conversation and review of our policies. We will be holding a city council workshop to review police policy in the near future, and I encourage you to attend that. While we can make changes locally, changes at the state and federal level will take time and patience. Lastly, I wanted to highlight that our officers hold each other to a higher standard, as they should. Peer intervention is a part of our training and culture within our department. We will inevitably make mistakes because we're human, but when we do, we own them, such as when officers responded to an intruder 2 days ago at an apartment complex with their guns drawn. They notified the surrounding apartment residents overlooking one. Learning of this the next day, the sergeant returned to the residents and apologized for their mistake and spent time with the family and children to ensure that they felt safe, invited them to the police department, and committed to do a better job next time. Meanwhile, we need to focus on creating opportunities for a more positive interaction between community and police, in addition to our many programs that we already have in place. Officers have families here and participate in our city events, sporting events, school events, programs, and many more. They are committed to serving this community. In closing, I want to restate my commitment to be available to you. I ask that you get to know our officers and continue this dialogue, and together we can make the change that you want to see in Morgan Hill. So Maureen and I will now answer a couple questions from our last meeting and take breaks in between those questions to answer your current questions. Maureen? You're on mute.
There we go. Thank you, Chief Palsgrove. So the questions from our last time that we gathered to meet with Police Chief Palsgrove were from both Facebook and entered into the chat. These were the ones that we were not able to answer. So the first one is from Facebook, Tammy Parker, and she asked, with regard to duty to intervene and stop excessive force by officers, do you think rookie officers will have the willingness to step in if they witness an excessive force situation by a training officer?
And the answer is yes. It's part of their 6-month training program while they're at the police academy, and they do several scenario cases where they're graded and evaluated by tenured police officers. After the police academy, they go into a 16-week field training program, and they are trained by a tenured police officer that has undergone a 40-hour post-approved training officers program that also emphasizes adult learning methods and reemphasizes one of many things is the duty to intervene. And while they're on the training program, there's oversight by a police sergeant who is monitoring the training program, as well as a field training sergeant who takes another objective look on what the officer is doing. And during that training program, there are scenario-based training where the officers are put in positions where they need to intervene. And if they don't intervene, then they don't pass the training program. And they will go through remediation or they won't pass the program. So that concludes my answer.
Okay. The second question is also from Facebook, from Frank Riley. On the military side of the house, with regard to counseling, service members may say that they are not under the care of a counselor therapist on annual questionnaires for stress or family counseling, etc. I imagine our police force has the same kind of policy to encourage officers to see a counselor. And sorry, I was reading that we will answer the question live, and here we are. Do you need me to repeat that? Oh.
Yes, the city provides all employees free counseling, free confidential counseling, and we provide a variety of other stress reduction opportunities such as mindfulness training, peer support. We have a chaplaincy program, and there's other training opportunities and programs as well. And we also participate in regional peer support groups and trainings.
Third question from last time. This is from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, when I watch many of the demonstrations on TV, I hear many times from those demonstrators via the media saying police officers need more training. From my understanding, an officer receives extensive training at the beginning of their career, and you've alluded to this already, in addition to their formal education, and then more training than was described by one of the slides that you shared last time, Chief Palsgrove. Can you quickly describe how much training a typical officer receives on an annual basis?
Yes, officers receive approximately 24 hours of training, in-house training a year. So we send officers to get certified and through POST, Police Officer Standards Training. That POST is the governing body in the state of California that requires minimum standard training for all police officers. So 24 hours of in-house training each year, and that does not include additional training classes that an officer attends as a part of their rank or their specialty position, such as traffic or detective, firearms, defensive tactics instructor, and the list just goes on. California Post requires peace officers to complete 14 hours. They call it perishable skills that need constant training to be proficient in. Those proficiency skills are arrest and control, firearms, tactical communications. We call that verbal judo or de-escalation training, and driver's training. And officers do that every 2 years. Additionally, officers are required to complete 24 hours of continuous professional training, again, every 2 years. So that's training that they can find on the Post website that's certified and attend those training classes. Usually there's local classes held at police departments or hotels that qualified instructors teach to a specific certified training curriculum, and they get credit towards the Post requirement for those trainings. And that's just the minimum. I would suggest that most officers receive substantial more training than what's listed there.
Thank you, Chief Castro.
I'm sorry, and that doesn't even include some of the trainings that I had on the website.
The fourth question here from Dana Thomas. Where might we community members learn of upcoming protests related to the murder of George Floyd and causing future change / improvement to the pervasive systemic racism we have in our country?
Well, we are learning from learning about the protests through our community contacts, our friends and partners out in the community. We also learn about them from different social media websites. I know that there are a few websites that are dedicated to peaceful protests specific to Morgan Hill. And so there's a variety of different ways that we come across the protests. I wouldn't point you to one specific location because there's different groups hosting them.
And we as the city are not sharing where these protests are occurring. It's coming from others.
Yeah, it would be proper for me in my position to highlight one group over another group regarding the protests.
Thank you. Do we want to continue with these or stop from it and check some of the questions that are in the Q&A? In case there are any that relate to what we've just gone over.
Sure.
Maureen, do you want me to handle those?
Yes, sure, that'd be
Okay.
awesome.
Great. Okay. From Simrit, how can we improve compliance with wearing masks in public? For example, Home Depot does not seem to enforce it for employees or customers. And so I'll start and I can ask Dawn or Shane to add to this. So what the order from Santa Clara County requires is that for places of business, both the employees as well as the people coming into the businesses are required to wear facial coverings. And so the responsibility goes to the place of business to ensure that people are wearing masks. But of course, there's only so much that the businesses can do. And so, Dawn, do you want to add on, what we recommend a place of business do if they're not getting compliance?
Yeah, actually two things. Dawn Larkin, City Attorney. First, we were up late and most of us didn't get much sleep last night. So city manager can be forgiven if she hadn't seen the news. But today, the governor issued, actually not the governor, but the state health officer issued a directive that all of us are to wear masks when we're, requiring us all to wear masks when we're out in public, unless we're exercising or in a remote location where we're unlikely to be within proximity to other people. So it is now a requirement it's not just a recommendation to wear a mask, it's actually a requirement. For businesses, even under our county orders, businesses are required to require their patrons to wear masks. Really the only option for a business in those circumstances is to ask the person to leave, and and then there would be enforcement if the person refuses to leave. So the new orders just went into effect today. So we'll be looking at what enforcement is expected of those, because they didn't include any directive for enforcement. But in general, our approach to enforcement is education, because we don't want, for lots of reasons, we don't want to have a heavy hand when it comes to the COVID requirements, especially because they are rapidly changing. So our focus has been on educating businesses and people going into those businesses about the requirements and the reasons for them, rather than having a heavy hand and writing citations, which would be a little bit more aggressive.
Thank you, Dawn. No, I hadn't seen that yet. Thank you. I've been in meetings all day. Thank you. So Simrit also asked us, can Chief Palsgrove use volunteers? I'm a certified security professional, California BSIS certified technology executive, and willing to take additional community police training. And so, Chief, would you just talk about our volunteer opportunities?
Yes, absolutely. I invite you to be part of our Citizens Police Academy when we start that up again during the budget reductions. That will be paused right now. We are looking for different funding opportunities, but as far as our volunteers in policing, you are exactly the kind of person that I would love to have part of our team. We have also put that on hold right now during the COVID-19, but we have had I believe one training class. So I'm sure you could squeeze in there. If you want to send me your information, we'll get you an application and start that process for you.
Okay. From Ian White, I'm concerned about the current trend towards defunding the police. I would like to know if our council is considering cutting funding to our police department during this budget cycle. I would also like to hear the chief's thoughts on what fewer police on the streets would mean for our community, given the recent violent crimes he highlighted in the opening. So what I would start to say in response to that is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this town hall, the council adopted our budget last night. There were no reductions made last night to our police department. Between the time that we introduced the budget and adopted the budget, we had changes across all departments, but nothing related to defunding the police. In different meetings, we've talked about the concept of what exactly is defunding, and what does that mean? And I think there's a thought that it could mean directing resources towards social services and mental health services and so forth. And so there was conversation last night by community members about that, and about looking at the percentage of our police compared to our general fund. We will talk more about that at our council workshop. But no discussion about defunding police. But we are looking at ways that we can enhance what we already have, and how can we work with our county and establish programs? How can we work with the neighboring Gilroy in partnering to offer more services and to continue to advocate for more services from the county and or state. Chief, would you like to add anything to that? And then also part of that question is, what would it look like to have fewer police on the streets from a staffing perspective, and then just response times in general? Yeah,
no. A reduction in staffing. We staff according to community needs and wants. And so, for example, traffic is a priority of our community. So we have traffic officers. If we are going to make budget reductions, we're going to have to pick and choose what services we no longer want in Morgan Hill. So if we reduce our staffing numbers, is it the traffic unit that we no longer have? Is it less officers on patrol teams that we don't have, and in which case would affect our response times, and it would affect us handling more than one major incident in town at a time. So if we have a collision on one end and we have a call of a burglary on the other, we won't have enough officers to respond to both at the same time. We have 6 officers assigned to each patrol team. Right now, we are down 8 positions because of people, 2 injuries. We got 4 people that are on training, and we have 2 vacancy positions. So I don't know of a time where we've actually been fully staffed at one time. So just because we have 42 officers doesn't mean that's what we have deployed on the street. And so right now, majority, we either have 5 officers on patrol or 4 officers on patrol. Also, we have a special operations bureau that has about 9 detectives in there. And so each detective plays a critical role. The sergeant plans for all of our special events and ensures that we have adequate staffing there, reviews the safety plans, makes sure that we have the right resources, cameras, safe routes, roads blocked, etc. We have a person crimes detective. So if we were to eliminate that, we have child sex crimes, we have rapes, we have other hideous crimes against persons that wouldn't be investigated thoroughly, and that represents a underserved population in of itself. We have school resource officers, 2 of them at a school. So if we eliminated them, what's the answer to having officers at the school in developing those relationships with the students, or being there in case of a tragic incident? We have somebody in a task force at the Regional Auto Theft Task Force, and right now our auto thefts are up. I think we're at 78 for the year. Last year, total year, January through December, we had 96. So we're already trending extremely high for this time in January. And that team's been decimated because of the COVID-19. It's also been challenging with 0% bail and people being released. We've had somebody steal a car 4 times and be released within 2 months. And so RADF, if it wasn't disseminated in COVID-19, they would be out there arresting these people and getting them off the streets, so the recidivism reduces. So anytime we reduce a position in the police department, it's going to be felt significantly within the community. And that includes animal control. We have an animal control officer, and we just have 1. And so if that position was eliminated, that would be significantly felt in the community. So
yeah, so just to kind of wrap that up, you heard from our chief sort of, how we have people deployed and what it might mean if we were to reduce the staffing, and so I think what our focus is on is, how can we, take existing funds, or advocate for new funds for additional services for our community. So we're going to answer, I think, one more question from our Q&A. We do have a chat feature. Michelle has asked that if there's questions, put them in the Q&A rather than in the chat. But a lot of nice compliments. I just want to let you know, Chief, that are in the chat right now, just thanking MHPD for all that they do and for their sacrifices and keeping people safe. And so hopefully, Michelle, we can find a way to capture those to share those with both the chief and the team as well. Okay, so back to our questions. Let's see, from Nico, provide one example of systemic racism which is here in Morgan Hill. So that's a tough question to answer. I think that how I would respond to that is that we're open to listening and discussing, and there's so many different viewpoints on this topic. We have some on this, that will say, hey, we need to make fundamental changes, and others are like, wow, you guys are doing a great job. Why are we even talking about this? So a lot of different viewpoints, and we're here to listen. And I just want to point out that I think that we all, in some way or another, have some level of implicit bias, and so we just need to be aware of that. Chief and or Dawn, do you want to add anything to that?
I'll add that there are laws that affect a certain group or a certain percentage of our community more than others. A few years ago, we were addressing the unlicensed driver laws, where we would tow the vehicles of somebody that didn't have a license, and it would cause a additional burden on those people that couldn't get licenses, that were part of our community and trying to go to work. And so we looked at our policy, and we ensured that we weren't going to continue to add additional burdens for people by towing their cars if they weren't driving in a reckless manner. So if we were to pull them over for a a fix-it ticket. We would issue them the ticket for unlicensed driver and for the expired registration, but we weren't going to enforce the impound of the vehicle for 30 days and cost thousands of dollars when there wasn't an egregious or public safety risk. And so I think it's laws like that need to be reevaluated sometimes, some policies. If we have a high crime area and we are really enforcing that area, that we take a look at specifically what's going on there so that other people in that area aren't unfairly targeted or experiencing unnecessary police contacts. So I think the unconscious bias sometimes isn't intentional, but I think that's what we mean when we are talking about systemic racism, that we need to be constantly evaluating our practices, our policies, our laws, and making sure that we're applying them not even always equally, but making sure that one segment of our community isn't targeted more than others unfairly.
Great example, thank you. Okay, so Maureen, back to you on some of our existing questions from the last time. Oh, Don.
I was just wanted to add to that. I think we mentioned this last time, but that all of our officers do receive implicit bias training, which is really important. Also, beginning this last year, all of our management team, all of our commissioners, and I believe most of our council received a more cursory implicit bias training, but as part of our every 2-year sexual harassment training, there's a component of implicit bias training as part of that as well for all of our teammates.
Okay, back to you, Maureen.
Okay, the fifth question from last time was also an anonymous attendee. And the question was, what happened to the new jail in San Jose, and is it on hold? And we do have an email address that we can perhaps put in the chat, but I don't know if Chief Palsgrove has anything else to mention on that.
No, I don't. I don't have any other information regarding the new jail.
Okay, so we'll put into the chat, it's new main jail at faf.sccgov.org. Number 6, also from an anonymous attendee. Since you cannot commit to defunding, can you please commit to not disband?
I believe we can. It's part of government's responsibilities to provide public safety.
Okay. Number 7 from Joy Garza. Chief, are there any discussions at the state level affecting the post budget regarding movement of any funding due to the current social climate? Oh, excuse me, of any LE funding?
Yeah, so POST is the police officer standard in training, and we get reimbursement for our training through the state. And we spoke with our representative who said there is currently no reductions in the POST reimbursement to local agencies. However, because of COVID-19, things could change, and that he would continue to monitor the situation and keep us informed.
Number 8 from Scott V. My observations have been Morgan Hill Police do a very good job. Is there anything the residents can do to help the police?
Thank you for your kind words and your support. You can help our department through your continued support and working with us in partnership to keep the community safe. One way is to hold a neighborhood watch meeting in your neighborhood. This provides residents with the opportunity to meet and talk with an officer about issues specific to your neighborhood and citywide. The program is currently suspended due to COVID-19, but we will be starting it up very soon. But with that said, I think that somebody wanted to hold a Zoom meeting, that we would be more than happy to participate in one of those as well.
Okay, and from David Lovato, the annual community building campaign National Night Out promotes police community partnerships, and neighborhood. Unfortunately, this only happens once a year. As a resident of a newly built community in Morgan Hill, are there other community engagement opportunities available for dialogue sessions between the community and our local law enforcement?
Yeah, so I'd refer back to our Neighborhood Watch program. I would also include in that the ride-along program that's currently suspended. We have Coffee with a Cop fairly routinely. And we also have programs like the Parent Project and Citizens Police Academy, which is currently suspended at this time, but we will bring that back.
Okay, and I think we'll go back to Christina for more questions in the chat or the
Okay.
Q&A.
I'm going to do 2 questions and then we will take 2 live callers or Zoomers. Okay, so the next question that I have here from Greg Hall, we are already understaffed. How can the council cut funding when we already did not have enough? I think we addressed that there's not any planned reductions at this point in time. How diverse is the police office staff? Does Morgan Hill feel that a diverse staff will project equality that many seek? And if I can do this, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so do you see some graphs? So this first graph here is from the 2010 Bay Area census. And so you can kind of see the breakdown with white at 50.3, Hispanic at 34. You can see Asian here in black. And so this represents 2010 census data. And then if we go down here, this represents our demographics of our 39 officers as of 2019. And so that this is available on our website. So if you go in and you go to police and then you go to messages to the community, you'll find this, as well as other information that that we've recently rolled out. There's this here, as well as use of force information, our response to 8 can't wait, and other sort of items. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and move to the next question. Okay, so my family and I are terrified of the potential for uprising crime rate and would likely move elsewhere if MHPD budgets were to be reduced. Morgan Hill already has the highest Section 8 housing per capita than anywhere else in the Bay Area and has already approved additional properties be reserved for Section 8 housing. I appreciate the effort to provide housing to low-income families. However, with more low-income housing comes more crime. I fear that Morgan Hill is slowly becoming South San Jose. I support our police and strongly urge our council members to back our police force. Atlanta, Georgia officers refused to come into work last night due to their district attorney's office filing felony murder charges on the officer that shot the man that fought them before stealing and discharging a taser at one of the officers. The DA did not allow a proper internal affairs investigation to be completed before filing these drastic charges. The evening in which the Atlanta PD protested the charges and refused to come. So, it goes on, and refused to come to work. Several calls for service when answered, a call for a man with a gun unanswered, a child struck by a vehicle unanswered. These times are difficult, but I want to live in a place that supports the people who protect us every day. Police deal with everything from changing a tire for a stranded motorist, and that is true, and that was done recently, to violent felons with weapons. Please, Morgan Hill council members and the people of Morgan Hill, don't cut funding to our police department. Thank you, and this came from a concerted citizen. What I want to mention there is just thank you for your comments. You know, as far as housing goes, we do have a really great affordable housing program in Morgan Hill. 1 in 8 of our places is deed restricted, and the state has new legislation that requires us to allow even more affordable housing, and so we will see more of that. But I just do want to mention that we work very closely with the county and other sort of resources, you know, when we do have developments that are built, you know, in the very low income level, you know, so they're built, and then we work with the county and with police, you know, to help, you know, keep the crime numbers down and allow for mental health and other sort of resources. Anything else from the team on that one? Okay, now let's look at the active callers. So we have Luis Renteria. Michelle, if you can go ahead and unmute.
So Luis, you've been allowed to speak. You'll need to unmute your mic. Christina, if you like, we can move to James.
Yes.
And give Luis an opportunity to work on his mic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, James. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to share a couple of thoughts in connection with the idea of defunding the police. I promise I'll be super quick in consideration to everybody else's time. So as you may know, Morgan Hill has been a very safe area for a number of years. If you watch the news lately, however, you know the crime has risen in Morgan Hill since the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, property crimes have risen, and I don't remember the exact number. I thought I heard 30% since the COVID-19 pandemic began. That's point number one. Point number two, defunding the police is an unpopular idea, despite the media hysteria over it. A YouGov poll had been conducted recently and found that only 16 of those surveyed in the United States actually supported the idea of defunding the police. So defunding the police is a highly unpopular idea. And I totally understand, you know, for yourselves as leaders of the council, that, you know, you're public, you know, figures, and I appreciate so much of what you do, but I just want to encourage you to, you know, to keep on and continue and to uphold the good police force. And just a couple of final thoughts. Again, I'll be very short on this, is that Minneapolis and parts of Seattle, particularly city of Chop, formerly known as city of Chaz, have adopted the fund the police idea, and it is not going well for the residents. I've seen the Seattle press conference with the mayor and police chief that was pretty recent, and you might remember that the police chief stated that 911 calls from the city of Chop took 3 times as long to answer because they were being blocked and there were no police presence inside the city. And so also folks are leaving Minneapolis and Seattle in droves, which is lowering housing prices, and that's revenue damage to the city. So one thing to remember about defunding the police is reducing the budget does equal reducing police. And the very last thing that I will say, and thank you so much for your time, is the idea of defunding the police that's spouted. It's actually causing a lot of police officers to resign, particularly in Atlanta. Minneapolis already committed to defunding the police. And that makes us safe, less safe as residents. After the shooting of Rashard Brooks, police officers have started to call in sick and essentially are choosing not to do their jobs. We cannot have that here in Morgan Hill. The idea of receiving less support from the city, I would imagine, sir, for you as a police officer, that's a distraction. And I'm a martial artist myself, obviously not the same as a police officer, but I understand that when you're in a combat situation, if you're distracted by the fact that you're not supported by your own city, that makes you less efficient. So thank you so much, City Council, Sir, Chief of Police. Congratulations to you. And I just greatly say once again, do not defund the police. We will regret it if we do. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we could try Louis or Luis, you can speak, you just need to unmute your mic. And while we're waiting, I'll go to a couple other questions. This is from Nicola Carpendale. Some of the idea of defunding is to unload the police of activities that are not crime. Seems like enforcing the mask rules would be best done by health-oriented people, not the police department. Thank you for that comment. And yeah, there are certainly areas in which we have, these sort of things that aren't just, by police. We do have a code compliance division, while it's limited, but there are other sort of areas where it's not necessarily a police officer. Anything else, Shane, on that one?
No.
Okay. And then also from Nicola, do we have citizen oversight of our PD? Do we have a regular survey of community perception of the PD? So we do not have civilian oversight of our PD. We don't have a separate sort of board or committee just on police. You know, I from my experience, cities our size typically don't have those sort of oversight committees. You know, we have our council, but not a separate committee. Anything to add to that, Don or Chief?
No, I think that's correct. I think, as I mentioned last time, the Chief and I and others in the police administration have been looking at ways that we can be more transparent about citizen complaints without violating the law and without requiring more expense. And so those conversations are ongoing, and we will be.
Just so you know, in the Q&A, when you see.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
That was it.
Yeah, so the Civilian Review Board, we have had 9 use of force incidences in Morgan Hill, and we've had, we average about maybe 5 or 10 complaints out of 35,833 calls for service in a year. And so I'm not quite sure if they would have consistent work to do either in that regard. And like the city attorney said, that also costs money to have. So we have to weigh the cost versus benefit.
Okay, and do we have a regular survey of community perception of the PD? You know, so I wouldn't say regular, but we do periodic polling. And that's, you know, if we're looking at a potential ballot measure, and we'll look at general community perceptions of government, and sometimes, you know, going into layers such as police. Chief, do we do anything above and beyond that? Have we in the past on surveys?
Yeah, we've had, I think, I'm thinking the number three different types of surveys since we've been here. But I'd also like to say in jest that we have a ongoing regular survey every day through social media. We hear when we do good and we hear when we do bad, and it's broadcast all over the place. So, but no, nothing formal. That's ongoing.
Okay, Michelle, Dennis Flowers. You can go ahead and, oh good, you're unmuted.
Hello, everybody. I just want to, first of all, start off with thanking everybody for joining tonight. I think conversations like this are definitely always helpful and beneficial to our community. Chief Palsgrove, first of all, congratulations. You obviously stepped into a role during a very difficult time, and being a police chief in general is already difficult. So what a unique time. So I commend you on your leadership during this time. I'm actually a previous explorer from Morgan Hill, and went on to even do an internship with Redwood City PD for a time and pursued law enforcement for a while, and ended up not being my career of choice. However, Morgan Hill PD shaped who I am today, defined me as a man. So commend you guys on that. And you know, whether you remember me or not, you shaped my life as well. So I appreciate that. But in regards to a question, as you've stepped in to this challenging role in this difficult time, you know, there's only been so many things that you could have focused on. However, what have been your top priorities, especially as it has related to, you know, the current circumstances surrounding George Floyd and, you know, Rayshard Brooks? What have been your focuses during this time?
Wow. So my focus first stepping into the position during the COVID-19 was staffing levels, making sure that the 12 officers that were out returned to duty after they were healthy. We were focusing on hiring. During the George Floyd incident, priorities changed to make sure that we were engaging with the community so that they felt supported, to make sure that the protests were done without unnecessary conflict between motorists and protesters, making sure that we did our part and got out in the community and continued to have a positive police presence at any opportunity that presented itself. And I was amazed that to see our officers during these times, organically, they did a birthday visit and they posted it. And I think we were one of the first agencies, if not the first agency in the county to do that. And then it just went viral, and Facebook blew up with requests, and they just continued doing it. We've been invited to participate in food deliveries and food drives to bring food out to different communities, and the officers have been doing that on a regular basis every Monday and periodically throughout other times. And so I think right now, to answer your question, is what have I been focusing on? I've been focusing on relationships because that's the bread and butter of effective law enforcement, is getting to know your community, working with them, partnering with them, addressing their needs. They're supporting you, and that's how we get through horrific events like we're in right now.
Thank you, Dennis, for that question. I think I'll go ahead and read one more question, and then we'll turn it back over to you, Maureen. Anonymous. If the staff consists of 42 officers, it would be nice to let the public know how many officers are on the field at all times. Some type of live spreadsheet that shows this for the sake of security. And so I'm not sure, what we're able to share as far as number of officers on the street and what is, how we would respond to that. So I'll turn it over to Shane and Dawn.
Yeah, we have 42 officers. We have 24 officers assigned to our patrol division. We have 9 officers assigned to our detective bureau. We have 3 officers assigned to our traffic unit, and we have 4 officers assigned to the administration. The administration is 1 chief, 2 captains, and an admin sergeant. So with that, we're down 8 right now, 8 officers. So we do have some vacancies due to people being trained, newly hired, injured, and 1 in the police academy. So typically, to answer your question more specifically, we have 6 officers assigned to each patrol team. But with those 8 officers that are out, and because we're never fully staffed, we're averaging about 5 officers on each team. And if somebody's sick, injured, or at training, that takes that patrol team from 5 down to 4. And so 4 officers on graveyards. The day shift team that have 4 officers are supplemented by our traffic team, that's 3, and our detective bureau. And so oftentimes we will get sufficient units out to major scenes. But as far as our graveyard team, sometimes we run pretty thin with as few as 4, but as many as 6. We also have a street crimes team that will go out on the weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and they will supplement patrol. So we could have on a good day with all 6 people there, an additional 2 officers, that would be 8. So it all depends.
And I would just add to that, state law provides for mutual aid. So to the extent that there is a major incident in the middle of the night when we don't have as much staffing as we might like, we do have the ability to draw officers from pretty much anywhere in the state, starting with other agencies here in the county and then working out from there.
That's a great point. And we have a great partnership with the CHP and the Sheriff's Department, and we regularly fill with them as they do with us when needed.
Okay, back to you, Maureen.
Okay, this is the 10th question from our last time. Another anonymous attendee asking, the police are stating the police officers are risking their lives to save our lives, but I understand their salaries are quite low. We should pay them more.
Thank you very much. Right now, with all things considered, we are all lucky to be working, especially during the time of COVID-19, and our pay is competitive with others in the county. So while I appreciate that, I do have great empathy for those that are out of work right now, and I appreciate the comment.
Number 11, also from an anonymous attendee, what is the best way for a resident to see for themselves how the police department goes about its daily business? Are the ride-alongs still available? I understand they are terribly boring because of all the paperwork and lack of dramatic action.
Well, when I first started, I would say that that was true. We would have some days where we would want to pay somebody to commit a crime. Just kidding. But I think now with the way some of the sentencing reform and the zero bail amounts, we are seeing a lot more crime in Morgan Hill on a regular basis. So I would encourage you, as soon as we can put two people in a car, to come on a ride along and see what the officers are dealing with. The people are taking more risks. There's more pursuits. The officers are finding more guns. They're finding more drugs as well, because the drugs now are being dealt with instead of going to jail. They're being given tickets. And so things have drastically changed over the over the past few years. And I think it would be enlightening for you to join us on a ride along.
And number 12, from Veronica Andrade, in regards to call volume, are there plans to fine individuals who make frivolous calls, Amy Cooper type calls?
Are there plans to fine them? I don't know if there's specific. No, there's no specific plans. It is a crime to file a false police report. In something that's egregious, we would file a police report. It would be the officer's discretion whether he felt that if he needed to make an arrest to prevent it from happening again, or he would refer that case to the district attorney's office and request them to review it for a possible issuance of a warrant. But that's how we would handle something like that.
And number 13 from last time, from Yvonne Randolph, I'm looking at the crime mapping website and it doesn't have the demographic statistics I'm looking for.
So our crime mapping site only reflects the crimes that have occurred and does not provide any demographic information. You're correct. So you can feel free to give Margarita Balogso, our crime analyst, an email and ask for the information that you're looking for.
Okay, and now back to Christina with questions in our Q&A from this meeting.
Okay, so from Brittany, Morgan Hill Police Department has not had a shooting or in custody death in over 10 years. Why are they being treated like they have done something wrong? Aren't they CIT trained? Chief.
Yes. CIT trained is a crisis intervention training. It's a 40-hour course that police officers go to that addresses how to de-escalate situations, deal with mental health issues, and a variety of others. And we have made it a priority to send 100% of our police officers through that training. The only officers that have not attended that training right now probably have less than two years on, and will be attending that training at the next next available class.
Okay, we from an anonymous attendee, is it okay for families to have large gatherings, parties at the home with no enforcement of masks? We have seen a home that has had this kind of gathering this past weekend with no regards to protection nor any respect for others in the surrounding community. Parking in front of other homes and some even throwing masks on the floor just to blow around in the street onto others' properties. Is this the conduct we are encouraging? So no, we certainly don't want to encourage that. Now, Dawn, I'm going to look to you. In the new mask order, it doesn't apply to when you're in your own home, probably nor someone else's home. Right now, the order still doesn't allow for large gatherings, whether they be at home or even outside for that matter. Anything else that you would want to add to that?
No, I think that's right. I mean, there shouldn't be large gatherings at home or anywhere else. Um, enforcement of the order in that regard is difficult, but it is still something we would strongly encourage people to continue social distancing. We've had some talk about Morgan Hill being different because we're a more rural community than some of the other communities in our county. But I would note that we have more coronavirus cases per capita than most of the cities to our north. So we still need to be vigilant. The purpose of wearing a mask isn't necessarily to protect yourself, it's to protect others if you're asymptomatic. So I know there are people who feel like I'm not sick and I'm not afraid of getting sick, so I'm not going to wear a mask, but it's really not to protect you, it's to protect others. So we're continuing to encourage people to wear masks and to avoid gathering in large groups.
Thank you, Dawn. Years ago, it was decided that it was okay for law enforcement to lie to people in order to effect an arrest. How can anyone trust police or build a relationship on this dishonesty? Chief, I'm not sure what this person is asking. I mean, lying is not okay, but do you have a frame of reference for this?
I can address that.
Okay.
I think the issue in that case is undercover officers who, if you see it in the movies, are you a police officer? You have to tell me because you can't lie. Undercover officers who are acting in undercover capacity, and they say, are you a cop? You have to tell me. Then the answer is no, they don't have to tell you. And they're allowed to lie in that context. They're not allowed to lie in the professional context. They're not allowed to lie in a police report. They're not allowed to lie in official statements. They're not allowed to lie to the courts. In doing any of those things will get an officer terminated. There's dishonesty in an official report is not the kind of thing where you get retrained. It's the kind of thing where you lose your job.
Thank you. We have a live question from Tyler Mitchell.
Okay.
And you should go ahead and be able to unmute. Tyler Mitchell. Okay, so while we're waiting for that, I will go on to the next one from an anonymous attendee. Is there a standard that mandatory sensitivity training sessions be held immediately once events like those that have recently taken place occur? Chief.
When we have major events, we do conduct debriefings, and we have the peer support teams and chaplain teams that come in, and we discuss it. So is there a mandatory sensitivity training? We go through continuous sensitivity training on a routine basis. So no, we don't speed up the training to have it immediately following a certain incident, but it is built in into our trainings yearly, so that way yearly we are attending these trainings. And I'd like to point out that California Police Officers and Standards of Training has a much higher standard of training than other states. California is unique in that way that they do have a very robust training curriculum and professional standards certifications that all police officers are held to.
Thank you. Our next one is from James Levin. Defunding the police is a crazy idea. Crime has increased significantly in Morgan Hill since COVID-19. The last thing we need to do is reduce the police budget. Make no mistake, reducing the budget equals less police. Thank you. Tyler, it looks like you're unmuted. You can go ahead. Tyler. Okay, Maureen, do you want me to continue or back to you?
Yeah, please go right ahead.
Okay. From Brittany, considering the amount of housing that is being built right now and the number of residents that commute out of town during the day, I would think that it would be important for police to be out on the streets making sure we are safe. We need Morgan Hill PD, and we need to fill the empty positions since we continue to rapidly grow. Thank you for that comment. Simrit, how can we improve compliance with wearing masks in public? Oh, Home Depot, we got that one. Let's see here. From an anonymous, if we have less police, will the residents have to defend, protect themselves, and by what means? I think Chief kind of answered, what it would mean to have less police as far as, less staffing, response times would increase, and, we wouldn't be able to respond the way we do now. Anything else that you would want to add to that, Chief?
I think it's important for everybody to know also that we are looking and discussing at alternative responses, as I said in my opening remarks, to certain types of crimes, quality of life crimes, maybe disturbances. But there is a degree of risk to some of those calls. If we're having a civilian team respond out to a homeless encampment and somebody's having an episode of mental health crisis and arms themselves or reacts in a way that, and the team doesn't have the appropriate tools. So those are all things that we are discussing. We do have a mobile crisis response team that the county funds that's for South County that we partner with. So as soon as we respond to a scene and stabilize it, make sure everybody's safe, then they come in and they provide a little bit more resources and connect them with the services that they need. So we are looking for ways outside of the box to reduce the types of calls that police have to respond to, and that dialogue will be ongoing.
Okay. I'll have one more and then we'll turn it over to Joe. Greg Brown. During the last town hall meeting, President Obama 21st Century Policing Plan was discussed. It is my understanding that Morgan Hill Police Department has instituted some of the suggestions in the plan with building relationships with the community, which is great. I think I also heard Captain, now Chief Palsgrove, mention that more of the aspects of the plan will be incorporated by Morgan Hill Police Department over the next 5 years. Please share an overview of the next 5 years with respect to this plan.
Well, the plan is significant, and we would have to break it up and look at different segments over a period of time. We also are at the very infancy of that program. Our past strategic plan was in spirit of the 21st century, where we went out and did some community workshops, and we met with city employees, council, our police officers, other stakeholders, and we put together a plan, which is essentially what the 21st century policing model talks about, is making sure that you're responsive and you're connecting your police department with the community to find what is needed for each unique police department. And in that strategic plan, we did a lot of community policing, a lot of outreach, a lot of positive police presence and participation at different community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and much more. And so in looking at the 21st century policing model, we will start looking at what we have done, what we are continuing to do, and see how those things fit into the pillars of the 21st century policing. And my intention is to continue the dialogue with our community and start putting some of that stuff up on our website so people can see the progress we have made already and find some focus areas that we need to do for the future.
Okay, thank you. From Armando Benavides, are we seeing an increase in car drive-by shootings? In this case, how successful is the police in locating and arresting the perpetrators? We recently had one in the middle of the day. Chief.
Yes.
Oh, he meant car shootings. Let's see. I meant car shootings.
Yeah, so an increase, or I would call it a spike. And yes, over the past 2 months, we have seen, we've had reports of people shooting weapons from a vehicle. And yes, we have been successful in making some arrests. Some of those are still under investigation, and I'm confident that our team and seeing the amazing work that they are doing will continue to make arrests and hold those accountable.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, Joe Baranowski, I believe you should be, if you go ahead and unmute.
Good morning, Chief, or good afternoon, I should say. Congratulations on the job. You weren't an interim title very long, but boy, did you sure deserve getting rid of that. I hope you stay around for a long time. I got a question that's on a pretty different angle. I know that the fire department's recent service level study indicated that they have some concerns about their response times and the need for additional resources because of some traffic congestion that the city's experiencing. I know your model's a lot different because officers are not coming from stations per se, they're out in the field. I don't even know if you measure response time, but I'm just curious whether, if you do, whether you've noticed any problems and in general, whether you have any concern about getting around to where you need to get because of increased traffic. Thank you.
And Chief, we also have Public Services Director Chris Schioni to address, the traffic part of that question. So between the two of you, if you want to go ahead and respond.
Yeah, in brief, we are fortunate. Our police officers are driving around, so we try to, each officer is responsible for a different beat in the city. We have the city broken up in 3 different sectors, and the officers spend time in those sectors driving around. So our response times, we have different response times for different priorities of calls for service. A priority 1 call being the most urgent. We have an average response time of, I think, 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Don't quote me on that. Where our response time is 5 minutes. So we are exceeding the expectations. And yes, traffic does concern me as 101 is congested and we get more vehicles on the streets that will affect response times. Luckily, though, we also have a traffic unit that can cut through traffic, and that also helps us with our responses.
Chris, anything to add to that response?
No, I think that was a great response, and I think our continued advocacy for expansion of 101 is something that is important to us, and really, we talk about impacts that are caused by the city, but there are many people that live south of our city, much more that live here, that come from Gilroy, Hollister, and the areas to the south of us. And then unfortunately, Morgan Hill is the middle of the hourglass. And that is what causes a lot of the cut through traffic, because we get pushed down to just a limited number of roadways through this little valley.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, from an anonymous attendee, I value our town and all of our emergency responders. I don't believe we should allow the militant movements in other areas to force their policies on us. And Pat agreed 100%. Thank you for that comment. Ray, I've heard consumer firearm sales have surged the past few months. I think it would be great if you could provide safety tips, best practices, alternative ideas to guns, etc. Do you have anything to share on this topic? And so our city attorney, as well as police chief, would want to talk about this. We have in the past had workshops, on the topic of gun control and of course safety tips and everything that goes with it. So Chief, do you want to start?
Yeah, it's been a little while, but as a captain, I did some research on firearm safety, and so I would like to direct you to our police department webpage, where there is a section that says firearms, and if you click that, that has a lot of really great information and resources, that some of which will address your question.
Yeah, so you go into police, and then in the panel, there's a firearm safety section. And so there's a wealth of information that the chief is referring to. Dawn, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that what the chief said was that's where we are putting that information about firearm safety and those types of issues. So that's a great resource. There are a lot of classes and other, both firearm safety and alternative self-defense classes available. I can't refer anybody to anything specific right off the top of my head, but check the webpage first.
I was also just reminded that we provide the community-free gun locks. All they have to do is come down and ask at the front counter for a gun lock, and we'll provide you one.
Okay, anonymous attendee. Isn't it true that Morgan Hill Police Department has the lowest ratio of officers to citizens of any city in the county? Cutting their budget isn't going to make that better. We addressed some of that, I think, earlier on, but what I do want to share is yes. So in looking at that data, and when you look at the number of officers compared to population, Morgan Hill has the lowest number of officers per 1,000 in population. And so that is a metric that we look at. Now, last night, there was quite a bit of discussion, as I mentioned, on the percentage of the general fund. And so we're looking at that, and, we'll be better prepared to talk about, to look at the differences between the different agencies, because not all general funds for cities are the same. Some have different levels of service, some have the sheriff. And so we can and will be providing more of a description of how we compare to other agencies. So I think that addresses that question and comment. Let's see here. We have from an anonymous attendee, can you talk about how Morgan Hill firefighters and paramedics often need officers to secure the scene? I fear that if there were less officers, our safety could be compromised when it comes to emergency medical response times. That's an excellent question. And before, Chief, you answer that, one of the topics that came up last night is, the umbrella of what does public safety mean? Our council has considered public safety our number one priority. And so that does mean police, but it also means fire, and it means other services that fall under the category of safety. And so with that, Chief, if you can talk about the role, the integrated role of police and fire.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for me to also highlight that anytime that we have police activity at a house, whether it's a medical call, we accompany fire there. We respond to help administer an AED or CPR, and then fire will come and relieve us. If we have a major incident, a crime scene, and we are working that, we do a unified command post with our fire department. And also if they're responding to a scene that there may be a combative person or some issues surrounding safety, that they will call us and we will respond out there to help secure the scene and allow them to work on the patient. So yes, our partnership, our relationship with the fire department has become stronger than ever, and we really value the unified command post when we're dealing with major situations, because we can get medical aid in really quick. So thanks for bringing
Thank you,
that.
Chief. We also have Assistant Fire Chief Dwight Good on with us today. And so Dwight, I wanted to see if there was anything that you wanted to add regarding the relationship between police and fire on our response. And we may have lost him for a moment, so we'll go back if there's anything that he wants to add. Okay, so our next question.
Christina?
Yes.
Sorry, it took me a moment to figure out how to unmute.
Thank you.
I don't have a lot to add. We do emphasize our appreciation for the close team that Morgan Hill Fire and Morgan Hill Police have formed here. And we have worked together seamlessly on some pretty intense incidents in the last few years. And we definitely need our police officers to support us. And I believe the community needs the team.
Great, thank you. I appreciate those comments. Okay, so next from anonymous attendee, do we know, let's see, it's skipping around here. Do we know who shot the young man driving northbound on Butterfield? And tenant, was it gang related? How is Morgan Hill managing the many gangs here in Morgan Hill?
So the homicide that occurred on Butterfield is an ongoing investigation, so it wouldn't be proper for me to comment on that case right now. I can assure you, though, that our detectives are doing incredible work that truly amazes me. And the second part of that question was, how do we deal with the gangs? That's a complex response. My immediate, I would immediately point to our street crimes unit, who tracks and responds to incidences that involve gangs. But it starts far before gangs ever develop, and that's at our school, our school resource officer in our schools, making those connections, interactions. It starts with our police officers reading at elementary schools. It starts with our police officers engaging in other activities, whether it's food drives or special events, National Night Out, making those contacts. I can't tell you how many times in my 20 years that I have been taken back because somebody who is perceived as a dangerous gang member that's known for carrying weapons will see the police officer who used to work in his school, and instantly there's that relationship and the respect, and there's no longer any tough guy or representative there. It's a unique relationship where they're able to interact with each other and let their guard down, and it's seamless cooperation. And so I think that's also one of the things that are easily overlooked is once these, if the kids get to a certain age and unsupervised and they're out there doing things that they're not supposed to be doing, we forget that some of this stuff can be addressed early on. We also have a South County Youth Task Force that invests in programs for at-promise kids. I was corrected. I think I said at risk at one point, but it's at promise now. And so we do some outreach programs through that and try to prevent it from happening. But that's our, in brief, comprehensive response to gangs. And I'd like to say that Morgan Hill is fortunate that we don't have a significant gang problem.
Thank you. From Steve Chappelle, Chief, I want to thank you for your courage, the courage of the Morgan Hill Police Department team, and the amazing professionalism by each and every member of Morgan Hill PD during these difficult times. We will do whatever possible to continue supporting our local police department. Again, thank you. From an anonymous attendee, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief, and your department for doing a job well done. Question from Chris. Can you talk about the mental health professionals who would respond to those calls, unarmed and without police? I've heard they won't respond until the police have determined it is safe for them to enter the area.
Yeah, that's correct. Santa Clara County has a team of mental health professionals that respond. They're available during certain hours, but they are selective on the types of calls that they respond out to. They are not armed. They are not sworn police officers, and they are trained in crisis intervention, and they are hooked up with county resources. So once we get out there and deem the situation safe, then they come in and are able to provide that person with substance abuse care or mental health counseling or medication, things like that. There's something else I was going to point out regarding that.
Anything else about just response after police have come?
They are, yeah, not to undercut that team, because that team is an incredible force multiplier. When we are able to call them out, if we have somebody barricaded in, say, a room, and we've determined that there's no weapons or safety issues, that mental health response team will actually take that call from us and work tirelessly for hours to de-escalate the situation and get that person the care that he or she needs. So that is a great resource for our department.
Great, thank you. Okay, I just wanted to let everybody know it's almost 7. So what I'd like to do is ask you, Chief, just if there's any remarks that you want to share in closing. And before you do that, just a reminder that we'll have another town hall next week with Mike Wasserman, our Board of Supervisor. And we also, in more than likely, it will be in the next few weeks in July, we'll have a council workshop to talk about our police policies and to have it in a setting where our council is present. And so with that, Chief, any final words that you want to share with this group for now?
Yeah, I am overwhelmed with the amount of support that we continue to receive in Morgan Hill. And I am so grateful for everybody attending this meeting and showing your support to the men and women of the Morgan Hill Police Department. They need it now more than ever. And I know that support is twofold, and they love you guys more than you guys know, and they love this town. So I appreciate it. I'm open to the dialogue, and I am open to finding new ways, better ways to provide service and keep this community safe. So thank you again for joining us tonight. It means the world to me.
Great. Thank you, Chief. And that concludes our town hall for this evening. Thank you again for everyone joining us tonight. Take care.